In this chapter, we'll get set up with Telerik UI for Blazor and integrate it into our existing application. There are several installation approaches to get Telerik UI for Blazor integrated into your solution, and we'll go through them in the next lesson. Then I'll show you one of the methods to get set up as we install Telerik UI libraries and assets into our project. We'll walk through the solution structure of our RPS issue tracking application. And finally, we'll see how to style all our components simply by applying a theme. We'll look at the built-in themes, as well as how you can build your own custom theme using the Telerik UI for Blazor ThemeBuilder. Let's get into Telerik UI for Blazor. In order to install Telerik UI for Blazor, there are a few installation options and a few approaches available to you, and I'll discuss these in order from the most automated to the least automated. Which one you choose in your own development workflow is up to you and depends on how much control over the process you want to have. The first option is the fully automated approach. This involves an installer that's available in your account downloads. When you run the installer, it installs the Telerik UI templates that allow you to generate brand new applications in Visual Studio. These applications are based on the Blazor application templates that come with Visual Studio. But they also add the Telerik UI packages on top. This is very useful if you want to start with a brand new application and you know you want to include Telerik UI with your app. The second approach is using the Progress Control Panel. This tool automates adding the Telerik NuGet package source to Visual Studio, allowing for simpler Telerik UI NuGet package management. And finally, the last approach is installing a NuGet package into an existing application. This is the approach I'll be using in this course. This method leaves enough manual configuration should you need to have that kind of control. And if you are starting out with a brand new application, you can still use this approach as well. You can scaffold out a new Blazor app using the included Microsoft templates and then add the Telerik UI packages into the new project. We'll be going through this process shortly, where we'll be adding the Telerik UI package to an existing application. We'll install the NuGet package, which will automate the inclusion of the necessary DLL into your project. After that, we'll need to manually add the JavaScript and CSS assets into our project, as well as configure a few services at startup. Now, we are going to use the NuGet method to install Telerik UI for Blazor into our project. However, before we do that, I just wanted to take a small detour to show you what other options are available. And specifically, I'm talking about the Visual Studio integration that Telerik UI for Blazor provides using its extensions, and also the extension for Visual Studio Code if you're using that environment without the full Visual Studio. One way to obtain the extension is by going into Visual Studio and then heading over to Extensions, Manage Extensions, and then under the Visual Studio Marketplace, you can actually search for Telerik, and then you can type in Blazor, and this should bring up the Progress Telerik UI for Blazor extension. So you can click on Download, and this will go ahead and install that the next time you restart Visual Studio. Another way you can get the same exact extensions is by direct download method. And in your Telerik account, you can go to the downloads, select Blazor, and then you can get the MSI, which is the installation package, or you can get the MPAC file if you're using Visual Studio for Mac. Once you have the extension installed and you open up your project again, you will have the Telerik menu under extensions now. And then any kind of Telerik products you have installed, you'll have sub-menus available for that. I did install only the Telerik UI for Blazor in this case, so here is my Telerik UI for Blazor menu. This will allow me to create a brand new Telerik UI for Blazor project, or I can convert an existing application to Telerik UI for Blazor. So let's take a look at creating a new Telerik project. I'm going to click on that. I can provide a project name. Telerik Blazor App 1 is fine. It's going to create a brand new solution, or we can add to an existing solution, in which case you'll select one from here. I'll create a brand new solution and give it the same name as my project. Let's click Create here. This opens up a new dialog for creating a new project where you can select a hosting model, either WebAssembly or server, and then you can select the target framework. Now, going further here, you can select what type of template you want. Here, blank is selected, but you can also select CRUD form or chart template, and this will just create a small app that showcases the Telerik grid, chart, and forms validation all in one simple templated app. And the grid that's included here will show off the basic CRUD service which is a pretty common pattern for data updates in real application. And then you also have a dashboard template, which is going to use a basic dashboard layout. It'll allow you to customize the dashboard and show several examples of blocks that you can use to fetch data. There's also an admin template for common admin tool layouts. I'm going to select dashboard for our example. And let's hit next. Here you can select a starting theme to be applied. You can always change this later, of course. And finally, you have a couple of project settings enabling CDN support and or using localization. This application is ready to run, and you can even test it out by running it. This will build and show you a nice dashboard application, which you can use as a sample to start building your own application, or you can use this as a reference. There's some other Visual Studio integrations that are handy. If you go to the documentation under Getting Started, you'll find the Visual Studio integration section here. We're going to look at using the code scaffolders here, and this is something you've already installed if you've installed the MSI package that I showed you. Now, instead of going to Visual Studio's Add dialog, you can right-click on the project and find the Telerik UI for Blazor menu here. This will give you a few options, including adding a scaffolded item, configuring the project, upgrading your project. When you go to Add Scaffold Item, you get a menu of different components that are available. Let's say the grid, for example. You give your page a name. Telerik grid page is fine. The model name, let's call this one grid model. It's going to give you a mock model by default, or you can uncheck it to link it to your own model. You can modify different columns here, CRUD operations. All these things will be pre-configured on your grid. All you'll have to do is just change some values. You can think of this as a visual editor for your Telerik UI for Blazor components. And if you click on chart, for example, you'll see that we have even different options here that are specific to the chart. When I click OK, I get a new page. It's called the Telerik chart page, and the Telerik chart is already configured with all the options that I've selected in the scaffolder. We also have something called Telerik UI for Blazor code snippets. This is also included with the Visual Studio extension, and in order to get a snippet on your Razor page, you would use the TB shortcut. TB stands for Telerik Blazor. On this page, you'll see the available code snippets, all the ones that are available, and this is just another way to quickly generate code for you. So for example, let's take TB grid as an example, and here is the Razor page. Right up here at the top, I'm going to say TB dash, and you'll see a list of all the different snippets that come up. If I select grid, this drops in a grid snippet where you can modify the attribute values as you see fit. But if you're not typing this out, it'll save you a lot of keystrokes. If you are using the Visual Studio Code environment, then you also have the ability to create and scaffold out Blazor applications using the Telerik UI extension for Visual Studio Code. Let's go to Extensions, and then you can search here for Telerik Blazor, and there it is right there. This will allow you to scaffold out brand new applications. I'm going to install this. And once the extension is installed, we can go over here to create a brand new application. You can type in Command P if you're on a Mac or Control P on Windows, then the greater than sign. And then if you start typing Telerik, you'll see Telerik UI for Blazor Template Wizard Launch. I'm going to select that, and this provides a nice little wizard to create a new application. I can give it a project name, select the out path, and then click on Next. Here you have some of the same options. You can select a client, WASM application, or a server-side application, and then a license type, whether you have a paid or a trial license. I'm going to select paid. Next. And this is a little bit different because this allows you to select the pages that you want to be included in your application. So I'm going to select a grid. Let's add a page here. And then on the right side, you can manage your app pages. So this is a little bit more potent because this allows you to visually create your application. So you can have multiple pages here. You can add a chart to another page, and you can even add a form to yet another page. And you can have several pages with each one of these components. Give them names like My Grid, and you can even move them around. And then when you're done, you click Next. You can even select a theme here. Now there's the default SaaS theme. There's the Bootstrap themes, material themes. We'll go into theming a little bit later. For now, let's just select Bootstrap, which is going to change all your components all at once. And let's click Create. This will go ahead and scaffold out the application. You can close the wizard at this point and start working on your app. Your entire app is now scaffolded out and ready to go. You can even open this in regular Visual Studio if you desire to do that. So those are some of the options available for you if you want to automate the process of creating a Telerik UI for Blazor application. But we're going to go through a more manual approach, and we'll do that next. In this lesson, we're going to install Telerik UI for Blazor, and we're going to use the NuGet package approach. Now head on over to your RPS Tracker Blazor solution. This is the one that doesn't have Telerik UI installed. Right-click on the solution and head over to Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And notice that our list of sources just has the NuGet.org default and the Microsoft Visual Studio offline packages. There is no Telerik UI package source here. Click on this little cogwheel right here so you can access the settings. And we're going to manually add a new package source by clicking on this plus button. And make sure you give this package source a name. I'm going to give it the name Telerik. We can use the Telerik NuGet feed, and that's available at this address. And a very important step is clicking on this update button, just like that. Don't forget to do this so that the source actually updates in the list here. Make sure that Telerik is listed in the available package sources here, and then you can click OK. Now if we go to Browse, you can switch your package source to Telerik. What this will do is ask you to log in using your credentials. I'm already logged in, so it didn't ask me, but this will require your Telerik credentials in order to access that private NuGet feed. And you'll see our Telerik UI for Blazor listed here. Currently, this package is not installed in our solution, but we are going to install it right now, and we're going to check our web project. Go ahead and click Install, and wait for the operation to complete. Once this is installed, go ahead and open up the rps.web.server project, and let's take a look at dependencies here. Under Packages, you'll see Telerik UI for Blazor installed. These NuGet packages provide the DLLs that are going to be deployed, and they're going to contain the Telerik UI namespace libraries. Now we just need to set up the static assets. Open up your server project, then Pages, and then the host CS.html page. This file provides the head of the document, and we need to add a CSS file in here as well as a Telerik Blazor JavaScript file. Now, you'll already see that we have a Bootstrap CSS file included, as well as the site CSS for any site-specific styles that I've added. We're going to add the Kendo theme default CSS in between these. So right after your Bootstrap file, I'm going to add a link to the Telerik UI for Blazor Kendo theme. And this is pointing to all.css. If you need to copy and paste this, you can find this text in the Telerik UI for Blazor documentation under the Getting Started section. Now you might be wondering where this _content folder is. It's not something you're going to find in your project, but rather it behaves like a virtual folder and it points to the static web assets folder inside of the Telerik Blazor NuGet package. Our site.css file can be linked after that. And finally, we'll link a JavaScript file here as well, which is pointing to Telerik UI for Blazor, JavaScript folder, and then Telerik Blazor. This JavaScript file is included in the Telerik UI for Blazor library in order to orchestrate some dynamic behavior of the rich components that come with the library. Things like animations, drag and drop, or the drawing API that's needed for charts. This is not a file you have to interact with. Simply placing it in your host HTML will enable experiences that I've mentioned. That takes care of the static assets that we need to add to our host page. Now, we want to be able to use our Telerik UI components throughout our application without having to write using statements everywhere. And we're going to use this global imports file right here called _imports.razor in order to globally import all the Telerik Blazor UI components. So here we're going to add a using statement for telerik.blazor and then another using statement that references telerik.blazor.components. Once we have these in the imports, we no longer need to write using statements in every single component or page. There's a couple more using statements we can add here using telerik.font icons if you're going to be using font icons, and we'll get into that a little bit later, and using telerik.svg icons. You can use either font icons or SVG icons or both. I'm going to leave both of these using statements here for your reference. You will most likely have only one of these. The next step is to provide an area for the Telerik components to live. And you would do this inside main layout by wrapping all the contents inside Telerik root component. All the Telerik components need to be children of the Telerik root component. However, there is a better approach that's going to be more robust, and it's also best practice. And that's to create a separate layout that's Telerik layout. So right click on shared add Blazor component, and you're going to call this one Telerik layout. Since this is going to be a layout, we're going to inherit from layout component base, and here's where we're going to place our Telerik root component and include the body here. Now going back to main layout, we don't need to wrap anything here. We're going to leave this as it was, but now main layout will actually specify its own layout, and that's going to be the Telerik layout that we've just created. And we're doing it this way in case main layout or anything else outside of the body contains a pop-up based component that comes from Telerik UI for Blazor. And that takes care of our layouts. Now for this project, there's one more step that we need to do, and that's global configuration of this library inside program.cs, where the application bootstraps. You'll already see a few services being configured here. These are the services related to the RPS tracker, and this registered singleton services for repositories that fetch our items and the dashboard items and tasks and comments and so on. We're going to register Telerik Blazor here as well with our services, and we do that by calling builder.services.add Telerik Blazor. And that is it, folks. This is all we'll need to do in order to configure Telerik UI for Blazor in an existing Blazor application. Make sure to save everything, and you can even run them for good measure to make sure everything is working properly. Now that we have our NuGet source configured for Telerik UI for Blazor, and we've updated our existing server project to use Telerik UI for Blazor, let's go back to our completed RPS tracker application for Blazor. That's the solution that's called RPS Tracker Blazor Telerik UI. And since we already have the NuGet packages configured with Visual Studio, we should be able to build this one and run it. Now that we've configured the Telerik UI NuGet package source, let's open the RPS Tracker Blazor Telerik UI solution. This is the one that's completed. Here, head on over to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and then Package Manager Settings. Go to Sources, and make sure that Telerik is listed here, pointing to this URL. If you don't have it set up, make sure you go back in this course and set it up so the Telerik UI library works for you. This is now a source that's set up for Visual Studio and not necessarily any source tied to a specific solution, and therefore you'll be able to use it in this solution as well. So now you should be able to build the solution. Just clean it first, rebuild it, and you should be able to run it. And here we go. This is the completed RPS tracker application, along with all the Telerik UI for Blazor components. You can see here there is the combo box coming from Telerik UI. The buttons are coming from Telerik UI, the chart, and on the backlog page we have a grid that's pageable and sortable. It also has filters on it, and this is an example of a button group that does some filtering as well. Let's take a look at the solution structure next. Let's take a moment to review the solution structure of our sample application just so that you're familiar with it. Here I have the RPS Tracker Blazor Telerik UI solution open. The core project is a .NET Standard 2.0 library, and this has our entity models. It also has our data transfer objects, or DTOs. Here we have classes like PT user and PT item. These represent the database entities that can be matched up directly with your database structure. The PT item is an example of a backlog item that we're going to be seeing displayed in our grid, and the items that we're going to be looking at the details and editing. PT items has fields like description, estimate, assignee, a list of tasks, and a list of comments, and it inherits from PT object base, which has an ID and date created. You'll see many of these fields surfaced on the front end. Now the DTOs here are the data transfer objects, and these objects represent a convenient way for us to transfer data back and forth between the layers if we're adding new items or updating the items or adding new tasks and so on. Alright, so that's the core project. The RPS data.standard project is a simulation of a data layer you might have, a repository layer, that simulates a real enterprise project. This will have your repositories, maybe even an ORM connection or context. In our case, we just have some JSON files in this gen data folder with the data already pre-populated. We have JSON files for the items, these are the PT items, and for users. When we start off a project, we're simply reading these two JSON files into memory, and we're manipulating the objects in memory. These repositories provide access to the data that lives in the memory. So that's the data project. It's another .NET Standard library. And finally, we have the web.server project. which is the Blazor application itself. Now I know by this point you're probably really anxious to get started and dive into Telerik UI Blazor components, and we'll do that shortly, of course. But before we do, let me just show you one more thing that's going to affect the look of every single component that we're going to use from the Telerik UI for Blazor library, and that's the theme. Now we brushed over this very quickly in this chapter, and that was importing the all.css style sheet. I'm going to open up the server project here and the hosts.cshtml page. And you'll see that here we've referenced the style sheet coming from Telerik UI for Blazor, CSS, Kendo theme default, all.css. And what this will do is apply a certain default theme to all of our Telerik UI for Blazor components. Let me run this real quick and show you what I mean. We are using Bootstrap as the base CSS for our application, but wherever we've changed the components over to Telerik UI for Blazor, those components are not using Bootstrap. Those components are using the default theme that comes with Telerik UI for Blazor. An example of that is right here in this combo box. You'll see that we have a certain look to this combo box. The corners are a little bit more square, and the buttons are square, and they have this hover effect. If we go to the backlog page, you'll see that we have an orange color for the selected items down here, for the selected buttons. Orange is the primary color that you'll see for the default theme in Telerik UI components. We can see that on the details page, specifically in the drop-down list, you'll see orange items here, and it's a very specific looking theme. So now we have a bit of a mix between the Bootstrap styles for different UI elements that have been left over unconverted, like these text boxes here and the buttons. These are all Bootstrap styles, not Telerik UI for Blazor styles. And then we also have the Telerik UI for Blazor styles, which have a different theme to them. However, Telerik UI for Blazor comes with themes that you can apply out of the box. The default theme that we have here, then there's also the Bootstrap theme, and a material theme for material design. There's also a theme that's focused on accessibility with high contrast. You can find these in documentation as well as examples of these. And a simple way to change the theme is just to go to this CSS file reference, and you'll see that this has Kendo theme default referenced. Instead of default, we can say Bootstrap or even material. I'm going to leave it at Bootstrap here and save this and run the project just to show you the difference that this will apply to all of our Telerik UI for Blazor components. And here we go. Now you'll see a more closer match between the Bootstrap styling that I've had in the application prior to applying Telerik UI for Blazor components. So here is our combo box again. It's bigger. The buttons are a different default color, and the component corners are more rounded. If we take a look at the backlog page, you'll see that the default color is blue, closer matching to our default Bootstrap theme. In fact, the colors are the same. There's our Bootstrap add button right there. And if we go to the details page, you'll see that these drop-downs now have blue highlights as the primary color, and they are larger, and the text boxes match closely with the Bootstrap text boxes. So that's how we can apply different themes by using these included static assets and simply changing over the path to the CSS file that we reference. Your organization might have its own style guide, and you might need to implement your own custom theme instead of going with one of the ones provided out of the box with Telerik UI for Blazor. For cases like these, Telerik UI provides a theme builder. You can use it to customize your colors and look and feel of your application. Head on over to Telerik UI for Blazor homepage, and then go to the documentation site by clicking Docs and Support. Scroll down a little bit, and here you'll find the theme builder. Click on Start Styling Now. As you can see, I already have a couple of projects here. Yours will probably be empty if you've never used this before, but you can click on Create a New Project to start fresh. The theme builder does come with its own licensing models. I'm on a trial license right now, which is free for a limited time. There's also the Pro license, which gives you all these options. Then there's the Ultimate license with priority support and some other features that you see here. And finally, there's the Enterprise version if you need a more customized solution. We're going to start from scratch here, and I'm going to start theming by giving my theme a name. I'll call it RPS. And here you can base your theme on one of the ones that comes out of the box. We've got the default theme, a Bootstrap theme, the material theme, and then a Fluent theme. I'll select Bootstrap here and click Create. Notice that I'm on the live preview setting, which will allow me to inspect how the UI elements are going to look after all the changes that I make in the left column. You can get as granular as you want here and update each of the individual colors, font sizes, backgrounds, and you can do this with all the different components that come with Telerik UI for Blazor. For example, we have a button right at the top here. We'll just do something very simple, and this button has a primary color. I can change this to this purple color here, and in the preview, you'll immediately notice that all the components that use that primary color inherit that purple color now. So here you can basically visually design your entire theme. And when you're done, you click on Export. This will build a new theme for you and download it as a zip file. Open up the zip file and find the rps.css file. You also get a Sass file if you want to build that yourself or if you have a custom build process. But I'm just going to use the rps.css file. In your project, go to the www root folder and then the CSS folder. This is the folder where we need to add our new file. So I'm going to open this up and paste the file in here. Then let's head over to our host.cshtml file, and I'm going to add a reference to the rps.css file right here before my site overrides. And for now, I'll just comment out the original Blazor CSS file up here because our theme file will cover all the styles that we need. Let's run this project now, and right away you'll see that we have purple buttons on the dashboard page. On the backlog page, we have purple buttons for the pager on the grid, and anywhere else where we're using Telerik UI components, if the primary color is used in that component, it's going to be purple. So that's how you can build and apply a new custom theme to your Telerik UI for Blazor applications. One recommendation is that custom themes should be recreated after every version upgrade, so keep that in mind. In the next chapter, we're going to start using Telerik UI for Blazor components. One of the more recent additions to Telerik UI for Blazor is an online REPL that you can use to run code right on the Telerik website. Let's take a look at some of the features the REPL offers. You can go to the Docs and Support page and scroll down, and you'll find Telerik REPL for Blazor here. You can also get to the REPL by going to any of the demos, clicking on Edit in Telerik REPL. This will bring up that particular demo, Telerik Grid for example, that you can run immediately in the REPL, and you can see the grid rendered live. Click on this Getting Started button from the REPL to get an up-to-date walkthrough on how to use the REPL. You can install NuGet packages, select different versions of them, add static assets, select different themes. You can save and share your own snippets. You can even get compilation output. These options are all available along the left menu. Here's the NuGet Package Manager, for example. Here you can search for Google, and this will bring up all the related packages that are available in NuGet. And here is the Static Asset Manager, where you can add static assets like JavaScript or CSS. This area will hold snippets that you might have added. Using the Telerik Manager, you'll be able to see what version of the library the REPL has, and you can change versions, and you can also update your theme here. Finally, you have your Snippets and Scaffolders section. Here you can easily drop in either snippets or scaffold out other components while you're building out your demo. For example, right before the Telerik Grid, I can add an autocomplete, and all I need to do is just bind the data here and provide code for that. To save snippets, you would use this Share Snippet button. Of course, you need to run your code first, and the error message tells you that. And here's an example of what an error list might look like because I did not bind any of my autocomplete attributes. So this REPL is a very handy tool, whether you use it as standalone or just to play around with the demos.